morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar, The Marketing Leader's Guide to Driving Host Productivity and Increasing Revenue. My name is Husain. I'm the CEO of Casino Science and the moderator for today's discussion. We have a really great session planned for you today with some really outstanding speakers, so let's get into it. As markets get more competitive and player wallets get tighter, it's never been more important to have an elite player development team. But rockstar casino hosts, they are very hard to hire, and these folks are even harder to keep. So how can you build a world-class player development team that grows revenue and share of wallet? Well, in this webinar, our panel of player development experts will share how they implemented new technologies, new processes, and simple coaching techniques to help hosts drive trips and capture more revenue. Some of the really impactful stories you will hear today include how one player development team turned a random Tuesday into the casino's highest performing day of the year. In another story, you'll hear how a host team executed a VIP campaign on 2 days' notice to drive record-breaking revenue. And you'll hear how one of the panelists used a simple technique to radically reduce no-shows at VIP events, a challenge that all of you have faced, I'm sure. We're going to answer these questions and many more today. In this webinar, we have the pleasure of talking with seasoned player development and marketing executives with a wealth of experience. We have a lot to cover, but before we get started, let's introduce our panel. I would like our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us your name, your organization, and then answer the following question. So Las Vegas concerts and residencies are now back in a big, big way. So tell us, what concert would you be most excited to see in Las Vegas? And I can start with this one. I'm a huge Sting fan, and Sting will actually be at the Coliseum at Caesars in June. I also like John Legend, and John Legend will be performing at Planet Hollywood from April through October. So I'm hoping to see at least one of two of these concerts. Okay, so with that, let's pass it off to Nick. Yeah, let's go with Nick. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Nick Miner. I'm the executive casino host at Seven Feathers. Man, I think I would love to see Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like, I'm a big old Chili Peppers fan, or Weezer, because I'm a big old nerd, nerd rock. But yeah, that's definitely Chili Peppers or Weezer.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Grant. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for 379 Enterprise Management Corporation, which oversees Augustine Casino. And let's get Brittany out of retirement now that she's not in her conservatorship. I'd love to see that.
I saw Brittany at Planet Hollywood a few years ago, and she was awesome.
Hey everybody, Craig Shacklett, CEO Trio 360. Oz, you threw a curveball. I wasn't prepared for this, but I think I would go with Elton John. That's one. I love his music. I haven't seen him live yet. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. So let's get started. In our webinar today, we want to get the audience involved. So we'll be running 2 poll questions for you to provide answers in the webinar interface. Our first poll question is as follows. What are the top 2 player development activities that slow down selling? So is it identifying the right players to target, sending messages to players, tracking players' interactions with hosts, administrative, and then creating and running campaigns? So we'll let that go for a few seconds before we close the poll. So it looks like identifying the right players to target, well, that came out as number 1 at 52%, and then number 2 was administrative. Any thoughts from the panelists? Any surprises here?
That makes perfect sense to me. It's amazing how much time you spend just hunting down the right people to contact. And streamlining that is huge.
Lindsay, Craig?
I mean, administrative would have been my number 1 had I taken this poll a year ago.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on. In today's webinar, we've structured the discussion into 3 different sections. The first section is laying the foundation. The section number 2 is removing the obstacles, and then the third section is elevating your service. And to begin, let's set some context to our discussion today. Player development teams fight in the trenches every day to build up player loyalty and drive trips for the casino's most valuable players. So it's really arguably the most important job at the casino. And the host can control the VIP's complete hospitality experience, from their transportation to the resort, to their hotel booking, to their non-gaming activities at the property. Player development teams can have hundreds of coded players to a single host, and that's a lot of work. Not only does the host need to immediately respond to the player's needs, but they also have to prospect for new players and generate even more trips. So Craig, you have a unique way of thinking about player development teams from a selling perspective. Let's talk about that.
Great, thank you, Oz. Yeah, I think maybe framing it may be unique, but honestly, I think once everybody looks at it this way, it's hard not to look at it this way. And really, it's breaking down your host team, your player development team activity into 3 buckets. So, and I'm going to try out a football analogy. It's the first time ever, so put in the chat if you think it crashed and burned. But I think we can look at it here. Why don't you put all 3 out? So there's 3 time buckets: outbound sales, customer face time, and administrative. So outbound sales, this is like your offense. Okay, this is how you're putting up points on the scoreboard. This is the time that your host team is focusing on driving incremental trips, driving incremental revenue. So these are trips that wouldn't have happened if your host team didn't have some intentional time where they're reaching out to players, inviting them to the VIP event, inviting them to stay over the weekend. So that is a direct, you can make a direct line to revenue with outbound sales activity. Next is customer face time. Now this is kind of like defense, and that's where you're building loyalty. One, you're building loyalty. So if one of your competitors starts giving out more lucrative offers, more free play, maybe that loyalty to your host, that relationship, will keep the player driving a little bit further, keep them coming to your casino instead of the other in spite of a better offer. It also, that FaceTime can avoid maybe customer service issues, nip something in the bud before it festers and the host is mad they're not showing up and you're not sure why. Third is administrative, and this may be like the special teams, where it's obviously important, right? You have to make sure the host is sending over that reservation to the hotel, or booking the player, or scheduling the limo, or logging activity so management knows that they're doing something. So it's necessary, but administrative, and Lou, Oz, if you can add the, there we go. Administrative, those are activities that, again, are necessary, but they're not driving incremental revenue, and they're not building value for your organization. So how do you maximize value? How do you drive more revenue from your host player development teams? It's getting as much time as possible in these top 2 buckets, and then especially with outbound sales, that offense, making it as efficient as possible. So to illustrate this in simple terms, like how big of an impact you can have on your organization's bottom line by maximizing specifically that outbound sales time. If we look at a couple key metrics, so we say trips per hour and then time selling. So let's say on average right now, typical host, if you give them a list of players to invite to a VIP event, let's say they can book 2 trips per hour, and given all the other admin tasks they have to do, they've got 10 hours per week to sell. So, and just use round number, we say that the average hosted player may be staying a night. Every trip that they're driving is $1,000 per trip. So using those numbers, they're driving $20,000 per week per host in revenue. Now, if we can make them a little more efficient, we'll get into that, how you can do it as we go through the webinar. You can make them a little more efficient, go from 2 trips per hour to 2.5 trips per hour, and then cut down on some of the admin tasks and give them more time to sell, go from 10 hours per week to 15 hours per week. All of a sudden, that the productivity of that host jumped from $20,000 per week to $37,500 per week. So just by tweaking those little metrics, you're getting an extra $17,500 per week per host. So depending on the size of your host team over the course of a year, that can obviously be big revenue for your organization.
So that all makes sense. What is a good way to improve the sales per hour or the trips per hour? And then, like, what are the types of technologies or processes that would make managing a player book of business easier for the host team and for the player development manager?
Good questions. I mean, the first step, I want to go to the next slide. An easy win is to analyze the channels that your hosts are using to sell. Okay, so I've made a kind of a simple chart here, analyzing the 3 main channels that hosts use to sell, and then kind of attributes of these different channels. So email, and I should add that email and text message, I put a check here for reach per hour. Like the host can reach a lot of players per hour. This is kind of contingent upon having the right tools in place, because if they are having to copy and paste and send messages one at a time, reach per hour, the advantage of email and text kind of goes away. But let's just assume you have a tool where they can send personalized emails or text messages at scale. Reach per hour is high. Phone call, that is not nearly as scalable as email and text message. Attention grabbing, okay? Your VIP players, they're typically busy executives, they're entrepreneurs, they got a lot going on. They get a lot of emails. An email has a high probability of getting lost in the inbox, but a phone call, when that phone rings, they're seeing it. They're seeing that the host is calling. They're probably not going to answer. I mean, like nobody answers phone calls anymore, but it's going to grab their attention. And a text message is the same way. When that phone dings, they look and they see the host is calling. Response rate, I think probably a lot of people that are watching right now can verify that text message has far surpassed email and phone call with regards to response rate. So when it comes to selling, text message is the, and we've got data to back it up, text message is the best way to market to casino customers today. Now, this isn't one of those things where, hey, switch to text and you're kind of sacrificing something on the player side. Like, it's good for you, the casino, but the players don't like it. It's actually the data proves the opposite. So let's go to the next slide. So this is data from a survey we did last year. We surveyed, I think it was 150-ish VIP players, and these were VIP players at a casino host at least one casino. And we asked them, check all that apply, what is your preferred method of communicating with your player, with your casino host? And 95.8% of them said that email or text is their preferred method of communicating with their host. Phone call or in person is only 6.9% of players said that's how I want to communicate. So listen, phone call is not dead. You're still going to have to make some phone calls, but you can make your host team vastly more efficient by starting with email and text, get all the trips you can, and then go to the players that didn't respond to that and then call them. So just by switching that process, saying email, text, let's see what we get, then call, then maybe drop the segment down. But yes, email, text, very quick way to improve your sales efficiency.
Greg, can I add something here? So I've done a lot of research and training for millennials, because a lot of our team is millennials now. And in the research, millennials hate phone calls to the point where it causes anxiety. Like, your phone rings, your heart starts racing. And I can't necessarily just blame that on millennials. Like, everybody does it. Like, you look at it, it's like, oh no, I'm getting a phone call. But the thing I hear all the time is, especially from millennials, is before you call me, think to yourself, is this textable? It's like, I feel like that statement. So like, I told my parents I'm trying to like convince them to start texting, and I tell them, like, look, when I get a phone call, I expect, like, my question I ask them is, who died? Like, who died? Like, once the first thing out of your mouth is, you should sit down. Like, you know, I think there's some kind of emergency, but a text is just so effortless. You don't have to respond right away. You can wait, look at it for a couple minutes and be like, okay, let me get to it when I can. But there's no anxiety involved in a text. So I 100% agree with this.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think this is unique to the casino industry, where if it's, you know, my oil change or whatever, if I'm getting text messages from, you know, from the mechanic, I'll get annoyed, like, hey, you due for an oil change. But for whatever reason, casino is an industry where players or our customers actually like it, because they're busy, but this is their escape, and they want to hear from that casino host, because they look forward, they're working hard, they're generating a lot of income, they're working hard, and then they look forward to the weekend, they look forward to that VIP event. So they want to get it, they want us as casino marketers cut through the noise and give them a way where it's not a phone call, I need to make a decision now, I can see it, I can look forward to that golf tournament or whatever, and I can respond at my leisure.
Awesome. Okay, so now we've set the context for the discussion. So thank you, Craig. Let's talk about the foundational things that are necessary to create a successful selling organization. Moving from a hugger to a hunter-based model takes organizational changes, it takes process changes, and a new level of transparency and analysis into the activities of your host team. So as we get into this first section, laying the foundation, the first question goes to Lindsay. So your experience in gaming is rather unique. What was your path, and how has that path shaped your thinking about your own host team?
Thanks, Oz. Yeah, excuse me. Before I joined the casino in 2019, I spent about 15 years in media sales. And I started as a sales rep. I worked my way up to sales director, and Augustine Casino was my client. And I think they were interested in having a sales mentality managing their host team. So I understand the way salespeople think. I understand what motivates them. And I've spent a lot of years determining what obstacles there are to success and figuring out how to remove them so they have no more excuses.
Awesome. Awesome. What were some of the strategies or techniques that you brought from the outside to change the host team's operational rhythm?
Sure. So there were a lot of goals that were set here, but I understand that you need to reward the behavior as just as much as you need to reward the making of a goal, so that it helps track and it helps salespeople understand how to get there. So what I did is to take a look at what are the activities and behaviors that we need our hosts to be focusing on, so that we're making our revenue goals, that we're making our coding goals, so that they're getting players from a new player to coding quicker, and then let's track and reward those behaviors, because we know inevitably that's going to lead to our success. And so that's kind of how I took the host incentive plan and kind of flipped it upside down.
I'm assuming you had to also make organizational changes there, or was it just primarily you came up with a plan for setting goals for the host team itself?
So first came the plan and focusing on the right activities, and then came who can adapt it and who can't. And we have one host remaining from when I first started, and 2 new ones that we've hired that are very goal-oriented and sales-focused.
How did you track things before?
It was a mess. So basically the host, especially for in-person interactions, they'd be carrying a notepad around, and then they'd write it down. And then they'd come back and put it in an email for their shift report. And then they would copy and paste it into a spreadsheet so that we could track it at the end of the quarter. And it was, I mean, imagine the amount of time that takes just for one person. The same was said for phone calls. So there was really no system. And what would happen is, because there was no specific way to do it, they would wait till the last minute at the end of the quarter and try to remember everything they did and log it. And then it was not necessarily accurate. And it was,
yeah, I'm wondering how precise was that?
I imagine not very. So it was just, they weren't making their goals. And so once we were able to put in place not only the types of behaviors we wanted, how many we expect every day, every week, and then a great way to track them, all of a sudden they're making their goals. So we got them tablets so that they can enter their interactions right on the floor. And then we used host software so that they can make bulk texts, bulk emails. They log all their calls through there. So not only is it very transparent, but I can see from when a player walked through the door, the journey they had and everybody they talked to and everything that happened before they're coded to a player and become one of our VIPs.
What were some of the things that you tracked with your host? Was it like trips, visits, a number of conversations, number of touch points? What were the key metrics that you were very focused on?
So the key metrics, because we're really focused on new player development. Their normal hosted players are incredibly important too, but we really need to grow new players, and so we're very focused on interactions with non-coded players and phone calls with non-coded players, and then text, emails, and trips as well.
Got it. Okay, so Lindsay is looking at things under a quantitative lens. Nick, you were able to look at things using a more qualitative approach by evaluating a host's communication channels. So you were looking at things like texts, call logs, email, and looking at opportunities to provide coaching. Tell us a little bit more about your approach here.
Sure, thanks, Oz. It was a great opportunity. We have new technologies that can seamlessly go through all of your communications, and using it as a coaching tool to kind of make the transition from the huggers to the hunters I can show direct conversations where they say, hey, you were doing great, this conversation was going awesome, and then you let it go, because they're not thinking of like, how do I crash this conversation into a trip? You know, how do I extend it out another day, or whatever the situation is. So going through kind of teaches the host, like, yeah, okay, like I see what you're saying, like going through it with a sales mentality versus just like the hugging mentality, and then being able to see, like, be able to show them, hey, like, this is how much VO you've generated just for this guest alone, and these are the conversations that led to that. It really helps develop the host even more. So it's the key to going through just once a day and just like, hey, looking at the conversations. Sometimes it's like really simple tweaks that they can make, like, hey, just right here, changing the wordage, like, nailed it, you know. And then also just for delivering attaboys, you can go through and be like, hey, like, you crushed it on that conversation, and way to go. So they always like to hear, and like, you know, I'll showcase them, like send out an email, like, hey, look how awesome this conversation was, and then, you know, you get thumbs up across the board, and everybody's, you know, all gelled and team. So, but yeah, this is complete transparency to let me see everything, and then use that to truly develop them into a sales mentality. It's really been working great.
So obviously you've been using the Trio software as a mechanism for helping you understand well, what are the conversations that hosts are having with players, and you're being able to look at not only the text messages that they're having in the email conversations, but also getting into the call logs to actually hear like what it is that the hosts are actually articulating to their players. How has that really like fundamentally changed the way in which you've been able to provide this level of training for your host team?
That's a good question. A couple different things. One, having them know that I can see what you're doing as a level of accountability, which, you know, not to creep everybody out, but like, I'm watching. So, and also there are times where, you know, it's a lot of times you kind of wonder, hey, how productive is this person? So you can look in and see, like, okay, yeah, you're claiming that you're doing this, and you claimed you called all these people, and I'm seeing on the call log, like, this conversation lasted 4 seconds. Like, I can't imagine this is a very healthy conversation, you know, or one at all. But also you can identify problems with it, where it's like, okay, I can see that, you know, this is what the productivity level I'm expecting to see, but this is what I actually got. What's bogging you down? Like, there's a problem here. Like, so you get that red flag, like, okay, we have a problem that it's not this person's lazy. They're being bogged down with something else. Let's figure out what that is. So just another tool to increase your productivity and just how to maximize your efficiency.
Lindsay, it probably goes back to some of the things that you were talking about before around tracking, because tracking is such an important part of like ensuring that you're getting the productivity out of the host team.
Yes, and something else I was thinking about as Nick was talking is that it also, because there's the transparency and all of our hosts can see everything, it creates some friendly competition, because they, you know, they may be going after some of the same players, and they're like, oh, I need to step up my game. You know, this person has really had some amazing interactions, and all that translate is to a better experience for the guests because they're getting all this attention from the players.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to sharpening your host sales approach, you were able to avoid the costly he said, she said gotchas. I think that's a very common thing that happens in the casino. Oh, the host said that they were going to give me this, or I was going to get that. Can you talk a little bit about that, Nick?
Oh, I'd love to. So you'll love this one. I got all kinds of stories about that. But so that's just a part of host life, is the he said, she said. So you kind of get used to, as a host, getting calls in the middle of the night, like, hey, did you tell Joe Schmo that he can have all the suites tonight? It's like, no, I didn't tell Joe Schmo he could have all the suites tonight. But there's one specific time that it was just unbelievable. There was a guest. They were midget wrestling warriors was the actual thing they were there. Yeah, claimed that I told him that he could have like 4 suites and 8 tickets. And he had talked to multiple hosts, and he all this, you know, he said for sure we could have it and blah, blah, blah. And he took it all the way up to like our casino shift manager, and he had like all of them there, and he was just yelling. And I walk over to the computer and I take every conversation he's had with all of our hosts and hit print. I just walk over to the casino shift manager and hand them the paper. I'm like, there you go. And they look at it like, we told you could have 1 room and 2 tickets. You said you wanted more, and you said we couldn't do it, and you said you understood that. He's like, oh, well, yeah, but okay. It's like, and this is a guest who historically will put on airs and, you know, fight and say this, that, and the other thing. And this is the first time I'd ever seen him shut down, just instantly like, oh, okay. So, yeah, and stories like that happen all the time. I don't get calls in the middle of the night anymore, like, hey, did you offer this person that? And like, I don't know, just read the text log. Like, so, you know, it kind of, the problem solved itself.
Yeah, it's interesting when you suddenly see the data in front of you, then it's hard to argue against it. Like if you're actually reading through the email or the text log, and the player can actually see that, they, you know, and other people, there's a level of transparency amongst the host as well, because they can actually see what is actually transpiring in terms of all the conversations with that player.
Yeah.
In the past, and we kind of talked about this, it's always been difficult to attribute the incremental trips and the incremental theoretical from a player's visit. That's always like the goal here is like, let's try to capture that incremental trip. Let's try to capture that incremental theoretical. How are you identifying incremental trips or incremental theoretical now from your hosts? And for this, I'll start with Nick, and then we'll go to Lindsay.
So like you said, it's hard to know, like, okay, if I wouldn't have had any conversation with this guest, but they still have showed up, you know, like how do I prove what I'm doing is truly effective? So the way especially with Trio, it makes it so much easier because now I have a conversation with the guest. Right from the conversation with the guest, I can log it in to book a trip. The trip's booked. We go from there. We have a goal set up where I can see, you know, the CEO and everything incrementally add. So then I look at just what's their average trips look like? Okay, so now I see this person's going to come in once or twice a month. Now all of a sudden they're coming in 2-3 times a month, 3-4 times a month. Now I'm seeing that all these trips are booked through these conversations with the guests. So, and then it's a really great growth moment for the host and helping them, having those goals set up helps them have that transition from the hunter to the hugger to the hunter, because they're seeing that what they do has an impact. So now I show them like, hey, because of this conversation, you've made this much Theo, you know, and it kind of shifts their brain into like, wow, like I have a true impact here. But just by monitoring, just keeping an eye on what their average play looks like, how many trips they're making, and then we actually are doing something where we're looking at everyone who's unhosted, who's a regular player, and then we brought on a bunch of new hosted players. And we know their average of how many times a month they come and play. And now all of a sudden we give them a host and we're overdosing them with just, you know, great fun communication. And then every month we're seeing their play. And it's like, wow, this person's play went up 10%. This person's play went up 30%. And the only difference is just host communication.
Cool. Lindsay, same question to you. How are you identifying incremental trips from your hosts today?
Yeah, my answer is going to be very similar to Nick in that what's great about this software is our hosts can have a conversation with a guest, whether it's via text, email, in person, but it's a personalized conversation, and they can tell them about something that's happening in the future and then log, I've discussed that event with this player and I expect them to come in on this date, and then sure enough, their software will tell us whether or not this player came or not. So we can directly attribute the driving of a trip to an actual host. And so that's, I think, incredible data to be able to have. And then we can track how their play has increased and how the continuous host communication is driving additional trips.
Yeah, that's always the toughest thing for an operator is to understand the materiality of the investment. So it's the understanding, did the activity actually move the needle on the dial of the business? And the great thing with Trio and some of the experiences and the stories you guys are telling is how you're able to actually tie the activity with the actual result, either the trip or the incremental theoretical.
Right.
Okay, so now the hosts, we've talked about how they have the right tracking capabilities and the analytics in place and the right coaching mechanisms to support hosts. Now it's time to cut down on the administrative activities and increase the efficiency and the volume of player touch points with better tools to empower the sellers. So now it's really about how do we fuel things up, how do we amp things up to get to greater and greater volume. So in this next section, removing the obstacles, we're going to talk about just that. And my first question is to Nick. Nick, you told us a great story about how your host team was able to create a record-breaking day on just 2 days' notice. Can you share that story with the audience?
Sure, absolutely. So the higher ups basically just said, hey, we kind of want a shot in the arm for this upcoming weekend, and they wanted to do a bridge mailer, but it was 2 days' notice, so the company that we'd normally have the printouts of the bridge mailer couldn't do it. And they were like, okay, well, maybe we'll do like an email blast. But the company we used to do the email blast couldn't do it. They needed 3 days' notice. And they turned and looked at me and like, can you do it through Trio? I'm like, yeah, done. Give me a couple minutes. So we set up this big text blast saying, hey, just for the VIPs, you have free play. You have a fun event. We're going to come down. We're going to do it this upcoming Friday with literally 2 days' notice. And we sent it out. And that Friday, it was unbelievable. So we had a whole big thing planned that weekend for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And for Friday, we made more on Friday than we did on Saturday and Sunday combined, just from VIP players, because everyone that was here were the top tier people. And that was done just on and it looked like their host was specifically saying like, hey, Joe Schmo, come down and play with us. But it wasn't. It was just me behind a computer, and the entire thing was done in like 20 minutes. So yeah, it was pretty impressive. We got a lot of attaboys from the higher ups from that one, but it was amazing how fast it was done, and the outcome was just it exceeded my expectations. So it was awesome.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's a great story. Lindsay, you have an interesting story as well. So you come in with an established set of new operating metrics to evaluate your host's performance. Now, tell us, how did that translate into moving the needle on your own business?
Sure. Well, first of all, our coded players per quarter has gone way up, which is pretty significant, and higher value guests are receiving a host quicker, which is really important. But something else we've been able to do is market seemingly unremarkable days and have them become remarkable. In mid-February, I think I saw a meme about 222 Tuesday, and so I was like, that sounds like something a gambler would be interested in. And so we took that day, which is Tuesday is one of our least busy days of the week, and we created a whole promotion around it. So 2 people won $222, and then 2 of their friends got $22, and we just really had fun with the 2s. And because we didn't have a whole lot of time to promote it, we used the tools that we had, and specifically we were able to send mass text to our players, but personalize them so that it looks like it's coming from the host individually, and it's got their name on it, so every single person just thinks they're getting this personal text. And that was not only the largest Tuesday we'd ever had, but it was also the highest rated head count we had in the house since pre-COVID. So it was remarkable. And to the point where the other departments were kind of mad at us because they had not staffed appropriately for a Friday when it was just a Tuesday. So, we learned some lessons there about communication internally, but it was a pretty cool day.
That's great. That's great. It's an interesting topic because sometimes we talk about yielding to non-performing days, because all casinos face this. There is going to be some non-performing days during the course of the week, and the obvious question that decision maker will have is, how do I get that to become how do I yield play to those non-performing days? And the one thing that I really like about Nick's story and also kind of dovetailing on Lindsay's story is that you were trying to yield to certain days, and you didn't have enough time to actually put something together. You used the tools and the mechanisms that you had to actually drive play and drive activity on specific days. Nick, all player development teams, they have to deal with administrative tasks, and this is kind of a hard thing for many host teams to avoid. Can you talk about how you've been able to free up your host time from your hosts from doing all like the administrative types of activities?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, when we implemented Trio, it was like, not to use the analogy of like giving a caveman fire, but it was like giving a caveman fire, because it's normally when you want to book, like if you want to just book a room, you call down to reservations. There's no priority placement. You wait in the queue with everyone else. You talk to the booking agent. Best case scenario, it takes 7 minutes. If it's on a Friday or Saturday, 10, 15 minutes on a call. And we booked 488 rooms from the host this past month. That adds up. All those 7 to 15 minutes. It definitely adds up. And it's the hard part about it is when we hire a host, I don't hire you for your administrative skills. Like there's a very skill set that a host needs to have. Like you need to have an outgoing personality, the tenacity to go get them. But we actually had a host that was the best host on campus, but man, she couldn't do the administrative stuff. It's like all the stuff is not very good. Now it doesn't really matter because booking a room now, I can book a room while one-handed while walking to the casino. And the first time I actually booked a room was from my couch, and it took less than 30 seconds. And that's just plugging in, hitting buttons, hitting send, and then a couple seconds later, a text message came up that's like, it's confirmed, and then I hit a button, and then it sends the confirmation text to the guest, and it's like, wow, that was done. It's over. So it's streamlining that process and using the technologies to get rid of that administrative stuff. It may not seem like a lot of time, depending on how your casino uses its process, but it can be better. And every second that you shave off is more time that your hosts, who are not designed to do administrative work, that's not what they do best. What they do best is schmooze and talk and get guests in. So the more time you free up to do what they do best, the more Theo that goes into the casino. And yeah, now that we found fire, we're never going back. These cables took off.
This is kind of a great one that you talk about, which is like the process of booking rooms, because there's a lot of back and forth sometimes that happens when you're actually booking a room. And like in the process, likely before Trio, you had to either call up the front desk or you had to email them, and then there's like this like almost this bifurcated communication channel where you're trying to pick things out of emails or phone conversations, or you meet somebody in the hall and you're saying, oh, I need to book their hotel, they need their VIP player, they want a suite that's on the top floor, and that can be a challenge to do if you don't have a tool to actually manage all those conversations.
Absolutely. And what's crazy is the options that we were thinking about. How could we make this better? And it kept coming down to, oh, let's just have the host book their own rooms. And it's like, oh, great. Now we're going to teach them a new program. Like talking about like slowing us down even more. Now we got to learn a lodging system. But yeah, that's a definitely good point.
I kind of want to bring up this other point around administrative activities, which is like goes back to tracking and how hosts don't like to track, and they don't like to do anything. And with software, and certainly software like Trio, all that tracking happens just like that. So it's not the host that's actually doing any of that. Nick, Lindsay, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, everything's just become so much quicker, and it is, again, I say, as long as I provide them the tools that they need to be successful and kind of take down the barriers and remove all the obstacles so there's no excuses left, then we're all going to be successful. And so if they've got this tablet that they can use at their fingertips, they are able to communicate or to log everything. Not only that, when they make phone calls, as long as they're logged into the system and pick up the phone, it's logged automatically in there. And as Nick mentioned earlier, it tells you exactly how much time has passed since the phone call started, so you can see what are legit phone calls and what aren't. And there is, you know, a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, and the hosts need to get used to the software. But once they are, they're raving about it and really excited about it. And it does make everything so much quicker. And it's allowed us to help them work smarter, not harder, and plan their days accordingly so that they know exactly how long it's going to take to do the phone calls they need to do, exactly how many interactions they need to have, and how much time they can spend on the floor, you know, talking to new guests.
Yeah, it goes, yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Well, I was going to say, off what you said, like the learning curve to getting on Trio. So when we were first introduced it, I was terrified, absolutely terrified, because I have somebody who couldn't turn on a computer to save their life, and then I have another person who's 79 years old and does the one finger typing. So I was thinking like, oh man, this is not going to go over well. And it took a couple minutes to get some traction, but I'm shocked at how they just picked up and ran with it. It's especially the guy 9. He's on it now just effortlessly, and it's easy enough interface that you don't have to, you know, it's to the point. You don't have to dig through pages and pages to find stuff.
Right.
But yeah, that was a big hurdle. I was thinking, I don't know how this is going to work, but I overthought it.
Lindsay, in the past, you've talked about the player journey at your property. What are the key interactions that you want to track as part of the host conversations with players, and how is this important in the player development process?
Sure. So our goal is to take a new high-value player and fast track them to a host assignment so they get the best experience possible, and they consider Augustine their home casino, and we get the majority of their wallet. So the hosts are logging all of their interactions, phone calls, emails, texts, and we're watching during that process. And you notice the shift to when the player starts to reach out to the host rather than vice versa. And that's when we know that there's a relationship there and that it's been built. But what else is interesting is now that we can track all of that, we can try to analyze it and see what's the formula, like what are the right amount of interactions and the right amount of calls before that relationship starts to reciprocate. And then we can sort of dial that down.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're using it to help, like not only nurture the player, but also to help as this teachable or coachable moment for the host.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Explain. I want to take a little bit of a different bent here. Explain a time where you were able to scale your conversations with a lot of players in a very short amount of time. I think we've talked a little bit about this, but were you able to get the word out as fast as possible? And I think Nick has a really great story here.
I do. So this is a great one. Okay, so we decided to do a big infrastructure construction here at the site, and kind of on very short notice, we found out that we were going to be closed for like 4 days. So normally when something like that would happen, it would be all hands on deck. We're going to go through and call and text all of our VIPs and let them know what's going on. It just so happened that on this day, I had one person on FMLA, one person on PTO, one person on maternity leave, and the other person was sick. So it was me by myself. And it basically told me, hey, this is what's going on. You got to let these people know. And then I was like, okay. So I'm in my office, and about a half hour later, like 4 people from marketing come down. They're like, hey, what do you need us to do? Like, we all have phones. Just give me a list of who I need to contact. I'm like, it's done. I let like 1,500 people know exactly what was going on and answered all of their follow-up questions in less than a half hour. So it was great to see their panic on their face of like, what do you need me to do? Frantic. And it's like, done, man. Go get a coffee. You're good. So yeah, that was the biggest like aha moment of like, oh man, technology is awesome. Science is great. Because that would have been an all-day affair, and not only an all-day affair, we had to drop everything and just had all the hosts with just anxiety through the roof trying to get through their list as fast as possible. And the whole thing was done, and I'm just sitting there answering all the follow-up questions that are coming, do I still get this promotion or still get that? Like, yep. I had my presets of answers, just like copy paste, yes, copy paste, no. So yeah, it was easy peasy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're gonna accelerate a little bit faster here. We're gonna go to our next poll question. And the next poll question here is, what percentage of potential revenue do you think your player development team is currently driving with your VIP players? So greater than 90%, 50 to 89%, or less than 50%.
Yeah, as while everyone's voting, there was something I wanted to bring up actually when we were talking about laying the foundation, where Nick was talking about qualitative approaches where you can actually see conversations that hosts are having and then provide some constructive feedback to make them better in their sales efforts or in just serving their customers. And the biggest thing that I see when we launch Trio with the property is, and it's a huge gain, and I think this is something that anybody watching can take away, is scarcity and a call to action in the messaging to players. Like I thought it kind of went without saying, but sometimes I'll just see, hey, we got a VIP event, and the host would send a text where it'd be like, hey, there's a VIP event this Saturday, and then it's like, wait, don't you want a response? Like, what's the action you want your players to do? And then scarcity, so it's call to action, and then scarcity being like, hey, we only got a few spots left. Let me know ASAP if you want to come in. So I mean, that's something where whether you use software that lets you send these messages out at scale or not, that is something that over and over again we see that right away can improve your host's effectiveness in selling, is scarcity and a call to action.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. It's the call to action is probably the most important thing. There's got to be some directed activity that has to happen as a result of the host having the message and sharing the message with the player, and that should lead to book trip, book hotel, some activity to bring them to get that incremental trip. So we're looking at the poll results now. I can see that the highest one is 50% to 89%. Any thoughts from any folks here? Any surprises?
No, that was about right to me.
We got to invite that 2% on the panel for the next one.
Yes, we absolutely do.
2%, no, I'm not sure why they're here. Just a victory lap, but yeah, I'd like to hear what they're doing.
I think that's Nick and Lindsay voting.
Yeah.
You caught me.
Let's get into our final section, elevating your service. And here we're going to talk about how scaling and selling service activities of your player development team, it really does matter. And my first question is going to go to Nick here. Lots of properties, they use events as a way to bring in players. So tickets and comp tickets, they become this really important and a very effective tool for hosts to drive trips. But there's an opportunity cost if the player doesn't show up, because that same ticket could have been given to someone else who would have shown up, and they might have spent significantly on in gaming. So Nick, how have you been able to cut down on the no-shows for your events?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that actually used to be such an ordeal. It was a big problem every time. I remember, I think the worst ones we had, I think it was like 60 no-shows, which was, I mean, and as far as the hotel, like 45 of them had rooms. So it was like, it was a big, that was a big hard hit. So what we had done is through True, you can schedule text blasts. So you go through to everyone who had, and you can also assign comp tickets. Awesome. Anyway, so you go through, you have your ticket set up, everyone who's coming who has a room and tickets, and you make a separate campaign that's just basically, it knows, you know, the computer knows, okay, this person has tickets, this person has tickets in a room. And then you set up this text blast ahead of time that'll go like the month of, you know, the month before it'll happen, like, hey, you know, just a reminder, you got this thing coming up, you know, don't miss out on Elvis. And then a week before, the next blast is scheduled. And that's the one where we'll say, hey, there's a big wait list for this one. So if you can't make it, definitely give us a call, let us know. And then there's the one that's scheduled for the day of. So basically, a month ahead of time, I'll set the thing up and just leave it. And then it's just up to the host to just receive the messages coming back, oh, I have to cancel last minute. At that point, we always make sure we have plenty of people on the wait list. And then we have the people that are here day of who just didn't know about it but kind of want to go, and we'll tell them, hey, more than likely I might be able to score you some tickets. And our no-shows went from these like 50 to 15. So, and those 15, I'll still be able to get rid of the tickets and the rooms, just because we can identify it soon enough. Like, we get to the point where it's like an hour before the show, hey, you haven't picked up your ticket. Are you going to be here? And it's like, oh no, sorry, I forgot. It's like, yeah. Okay. No, you didn't, but okay. So, but yeah, our huge cutoff for no-shows, that was like such an ordeal when I came, and now it's not really an issue anymore. The hotel likes it a lot. We don't have empty rooms.
Yeah, it's a really great way to think about how you can actually yield on to the actual day itself. So you're yielding tickets. So as people are falling off, you're finding other people to take the spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Craig, you did a survey last year that unearthed some interesting insights. How about you share some of those insights with us?
Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm gonna pull out the football analogy again, and we're talking about outbound sales being your offense, and that's scoring points. And the way that you derail a offense is with turnovers. That's the way an offense can shoot themselves in the foot. And so one of the things that can be a risk if you don't have the right platform is you're reaching out, you're communicating with all these players, you're inviting them in. The players may respond, but if it's after hours, or if the host is on the weekend, or they're out sick, or they're on vacation, they're not responding to the player, and that is a huge dissatisfier. And we actually went, as part of the survey we referenced earlier, we asked these VIP players, what is the biggest pet peeve? What sets you off? What behavior of a host just ticks you off? And the overwhelming biggest dissatisfier is hosts that are slow to respond or non-responsive. And I mean, it's worse than a turnover. It's more of like a pick six, because you're literally giving trips to your competition, because your host, if you've done the work of like getting them in the mindset, you know what, I want to gamble this weekend, that sounds fun, and they text back, okay, I'm ready for the suite, book me, and they don't hear anything, they made up their mind they're going to go play. And if you don't get back to them quickly, they're going to just go to your competitor and be like, hey, I was thinking I'd come in. And if they're responding, they're going to get that trip instead of you, even though you planted the seed and got them in the mood to play that weekend. So let's go to the next slide.
Well, on that note too, as a manager of salespeople or hosts, I can get an email every day telling me which communication they haven't responded to, and then I can go bug them and make sure they do respond, and I never would have known previously.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Lindsay. You're 100% right. That is the thing that, like, when I put in the chat, if this has happened to you, because I bet it hasn't, when a host is gone for a couple days or a week, how often do they come back like, hey, I just want to let you know, I had about 25 players texted me, but I was busy, I didn't reply. And I did the math, and I think we probably lost about 50,000 in Theo while I was gone. So sorry about that, boss. Like, it's a blind spot where you have, as a casino, you have zero visibility into the conversations that your hosts are having with their players and how quickly they're responding. So there's a lot of, by having the communication happen through a host's iPhone or their Android phone instead of a centralized platform, there's quite a few risks. Okay, so one is that response time breakdown where players are texting and they're not getting responded to. Second is off-brand, unprofessional messaging, because again, you don't know what they're sending and what kind of issues that can raise. Next is the comp offer issues. That's that he said, she said that Nick brought up with the midget wrestling ticket breakdown, where if somebody they're approaching a pit boss saying, I need this, and if there's no way to get a hold of the host, no way to see the conversation, then what do? They're in a tough spot, and the player's either going to walk away pissed off because the host actually did say it, or your casino's investing more than they should have. Activity accountability, that's just making sure, do you have a way to see that your hosts are actually making the outbound calls instead of just logging like, yes, I did that. And then employee turnover, and this is a big one because it kind of cuts two ways. So if a host that has a book of 300, 500 players, they leave, they go to a competitor, and all of a sudden another host is taken over, are they starting from scratch? Like, because if all the communication isn't going through a centralized platform, they don't know where to pick up. So one, they may miss out on a lot of things that are, preferences the player likes or trips that the other host is working on. And then two, you're asking the player to all of a sudden get trained on a new host's phone number. You need the host to text, hey, this is here's my new number, text me, Bill's gone. So that can be a clunky and costly process without a centralized platform. Now, conversely, if you do switch to a centralized communication platform like Trio 360, you're offering your players 24/7, 365 customer support, and you're not asking your host to always be on. I remember Nick, you gave a testimonial about how your wife wanted to bake us a cake because you actually had a day off where you could focus and not have to keep looking at your phone.
Yeah, and I tell you what, man to man, you do not want that cake.
I hope she's not watching.
We actually, I did the math one time to figure out an average of how many conversations I have, not individual text, conversations I have over a 3-day weekend, and it was about 50. And the first week we added Trio 360, my first weekend, I didn't get a single call, and it was alarming. Thinking, something's gone wrong, and then every once in a while I text work and be like, hey, how's things going? Great, good. I'm like, you sure? Yeah. I'm like, okay, because Sherry didn't text me, and Sherry texts me all day, every day, 24/7. It's like, no, we got her. She's sending pictures of her new puppies right now. I'm like, okay, cool. So, yeah, it's Trio 360 is absolutely my wife's favorite thing in the world. But under no circumstances should you eat any cake she makes.
Noted.
It doesn't know the difference between baking pepper and baking soda, or teaspoons or tablespoons. So.
Well, and I think everybody can see the bullet points here. But one thing just to drill in on the team support, right? Like what we're talking about, a host has a couple days off, and the players texting in to get something done, and another host is responding. I can promise you, after rolling Trio out to several properties, players don't care. They want their room booked, and honestly, they are happy that they're not bugging their host on the day off, because they want their host to enjoy their time off. They want them to have lives as well. So trust me, your players are not going to be upset if all of a sudden on a host day off, somebody else is replying, as long as they're getting the work done. Let's go to next slide. Oh, question and answer. That was it.
We're moving to Q&A now. We are at the top of the hour, so we wanted to try to get in some questions. We do have a lot of questions that folks have. I'm gonna put out this first question that came across here. My host team really just provides service and support to our players. Could the panelists explain how they transitioned service people to become effective salespeople? Is it even possible? So Lindsay, why don't you start, and then we can go in with Nick.
Yes, I think there's certain people that are very self-motivated, and you give them a goal and they're going to reach it regardless of how they're going to get there. And that's great, but most people aren't like that. And so what we did was we rewarded the activity as much as we reward them getting to their goal. So if you have some sort of financial incentive, we have our quarterly plans for our hosts, and there's metrics they have to hit every day that drive them even closer to making that goal, and you're rewarding the metrics just as much as you're rewarding the goal. Then you're training them how to be a salesperson while you're doing it, because they're getting used to doing the right behaviors.
Nick?
So I think my answer for that is kind of two-sided. One, if you want to create a hunter mentality, and you don't have a way of getting rid of all the things that bog down your day-to-day activity, the answer is no, you can't do it. So you have to be able to free up enough time to do the things you need to do. And then, like what Lindsay said with having the incentive, it's like, okay, so now all of a sudden I take away all of the time it takes for the administrative work. Now I just freed up 2 hours of your day. So now you can spend 2 hours of your day doing this and this and showing them the exact steps they need to take. And then, not reprimanding them when they don't hit it, but, praising them when they do and giving them things. We have little goals that we set monthly where we're giving out $50 site gift cards. We actually had a defector goal, like we're trying to bring back the old defectors. We call it the defector reconnector. We just hit our team goal on that. We're having a pizza party for all the hosts. It's just little things. And we actually, I coming from a host team where I thought, like, okay, out of my 4 people, I have 3 huggers, and they're never going to be hunters, and that's really not the case. As long as you can provide them with all the tools they need to see the path and to go about it, yeah, you can absolutely turn them into hunters. It's not impossible, and it's actually, once you get the ball rolling, the bus drives itself. You just got to put it all in place.
There's a great question here. How many text messages per week do you send on average to a single person? This is a good question because, like, it's very easy to overly inundate people with text messages or some messaging from the casino. What are folks' general thoughts on this?
The first time we did a really mass text was for that Tuesday promotion, and it was wildly successful. And so I had to sit the host down and say, you can't do that every day. I know you want to because it was really successful, but you're going to drive people crazy. So we have to harness that when it's really important. But in terms of their VIPs and the people that they're grooming to be their coded players, they'll figure out a rhythm that works, and it's pretty much around their interests, I would say. So for a player that loves a certain promotion, you got to tell them every time it's happening, and they're going to appreciate it. And you can also feel it from the responses that you're getting, because the text responses are all logged, and so you can get a general idea if you're overdoing it. But yeah, I would say a handful a week is probably the most that you would want to send.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, you have your guests that they just, I don't know if they're just lonely or eccentric, but they'll text you 24/7. But you know, those are few and far between. But ultimately, what I like about Trio is being able to build a folio for them, so I can check all the boxes that apply to them. Like, okay, I know this guy loves country music and NASCAR and all these things. And when you're actually in the text screen, you can see all the about info about them. So I know for a fact, like, okay, this guy definitely wants to know about the country guys coming here. Let me send him a text about that specifically. But yeah, only anytime you send out a big massive text, you gotta be mindful of someone's personal space. So
there's a great question here.
I just want to add one more thing to that. One of the things we track inside of Trio, there's an activity scoreboard, and it looks at, you know, emails, texts, phone calls, and one thing we track is conversations. And what conversations is how many messages went out that got a reply, and then there's a percentage on there. And because with a powerful tool like Trio, it can be easy to become spammy, where all of a sudden players kind of tune it out because it's another message. And so that's an indicator that you can, you know, as a manager, keep an eye on with specific hosts or across the team of, hey, is our response rate starting to drop? Maybe we need to be a little more selective about what we're texting.
Yeah, and you can actually, when a guest says, hey, I don't, like, stop texting me or whatever, there's a flag that's like, okay, they don't want to be texted. And out of all of our, I think it's like 1,600 guests we have here that are hosted that are through Trio, I've only had one guest ever say, stop texting me. So I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. But we still call him, you know, he just doesn't like texting. He's in that small percent that prefers a phone call.
There's a great question here about how do you get around federal guidelines that restrict certain content such as gaming or cannabis in text messaging. This is actually also kind of similar to a question around like there are like the regulations regarding text messaging, namely TPCA. Craig, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those laws were made around like auto dialers and spam messages. And so Trio's actually built, there's actually multiple ways we work with casinos to make sure that they're within the guidelines. So one is in the data upload, if you have a flag for opt-in, opt-out of text messaging, anybody that's opted out, we're not going to send messages to them. So that is one of the things in the law where it's, hey, if somebody says, I don't want to receive messages, you need to stop sending messages to them. Two, with Trio, if you're so inclined, you can do send everything one-to-one, where we call it you build a text queue, and it could be just like a text blast, and all of a sudden 200 messages are loaded up, and then you end up sending them one by one. So the host has to click each one, and that actually takes it from a robo dialer, which is how the laws are written, to a one-to-one text, which is exactly what your hosts are sending right now if you're not using Trio. And so in the eyes of the law, you're going to be fine there. So, I mean, we're as Trio, we're leaving it up to, because even states have different rules. So we provide all the tools for the organization to use, and then we will work with you to make sure that you're staying within the rules of your jurisdiction. But yeah, so I'm not offering legal advice, but there are several ways within Trio that we can customize it to make sure that you're following all the rules.
I just want to get a few more questions in before we end. There's a question here. Can you give an example of a text message sent through Trio?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go back to the Tuesday one. So the way it works is you go in and there's a button that will insert the person's name. So it starts with Karen. Wanted to let you know we're having this amazing promotion where you and your 2 friends could win up to $222. Can we see can you let me know if I'll see you there? And then it inserts the host name, Paul. So it's very personalized, and it's coming from the casino host. And then you can send that, and right in a moment, 3,000 people can get that text, but it's personalized with the guest name and the host name.
Building on that, there's the segmented campaigns, which really help out a lot, especially when you're doing a VIP event where you want to invite a bunch of people, but not everyone has the same promotional offer. So you can plug that in too. So say I want to invite 1,000 people, but they all have different free play amounts. So I just like, hello, insert guest name. This is your host, insert host name. I just want to let you know that insert event name, that the VIP event's going on, and then promotional button where it's like, and you're eligible for insert promotion with like $500 free slot play. So at a glance, you look at it, it's like, this is a weird looking text message, and then you send it, and then it just out to like, hey, Mary, you have the VIP event for $200, whatever it is. So it's really simple how to add it. So love Trio messaging.
There's another great question here. How are hosts responding via text? Are you providing cell phones? Are they using their own?
So it used to be so phone heavy. Honestly, now I just do it all through the portal on the computer. Actually, it's not through any specific device. So it can be Apple, Android, or whatever. So I end up kind of monitoring the hosts from my couch at home. I'll just log on and like, I wonder what people are talking about today. So you can do it mobily, you can do it on the phone. Anytime I'm on the floor, I'm using my phone, and I can book rooms just walking around, just a couple clicks.
Awesome.
Yeah, we do provide our hosts cell phones as well.
Great. Well, we've gone over significantly over. I do want to ask our panelists one last question. What is one thing you would recommend doing right now to accelerate a player development team's selling capabilities? And with that, I'll start first with Lindsay.
I would bring the hosts in and have them walk you through their day and the amount of time they're spending on various tasks, whether it be administrative, whether it be on the floor, and then immediately see what is wasting time and what is something that can be streamlined, and then think about a tool that you could use to be able to streamline all that activity so that you're removing the obstacles for them to be successful.
Awesome. Nick, what about you?
Yeah, essentially the same answer. It's like you just have to figure out what are the things that are really bogging down your host, like what hurts them, and figuring out what they're good at. And it's like, but yeah, you nailed it. It's just like, it's so much of your day is bogged down with so much stuff, and figure out where the problems are, and then find the right tool to solve those problems, to give them the time to do what they need to do. And what they do is they schmooze, let them schmooze. And it's hard to schmooze when you're too busy doing administrative work or filling out logs that prove that you talked to somebody. Like, it just takes up so much of your day to do what they're doing best. So
awesome. Craig, last word to you.
I mean, I can't really add on. I think Lindsay and Nick nailed it. It's really just analyzing. I mean, look at the 3 buckets and try to first identify how much time your hosts are spending in each of the 3 buckets. If you can, try to measure how many trips per hour they're doing right now, how much time are they actually spent selling, and then you have a clear idea of, okay, what are the metrics that I need to focus on? Do I need to free up admin time so I have more time to sell? And that's how we'll drive more revenue. If you think you've already made it as streamlined as possible and there's not more admin time to cut, then just focus on how can I help you sell more in the time you have to sell. And obviously, I think Trio 360 is the best tool on the market. And I was looking through, I saw Darius, he had a question about dashboards. Yes, there's dashboards. There's the answer to everything is yes, Trio 360. And I think that's it. But anyway, I just want to thank Nick and Lindsay for all the stories and just being so great at using Trio. You guys are, I didn't even have to talk hardly at all this webinar. You guys did great, so thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists today for participating in this webinar. We're really grateful that you could attend today, and then many thanks for the great discussion. I would also like to thank our friends at CDC Gaming and Dave Newton for hosting today's webinar. This webinar will be available on the CDC Gaming and Casino Science website. Casino Science is a data science and analytics solutions company operating exclusively in tribal and commercial gaming across the US and Canada. The company offers a flexible approach to managing an organization's casino marketing and finance needs. We've partnered with Trio 360 to deliver the only casino marketing platform to combine call, text, email communications, and VIP reservation management into a single tool, helping casinos drive more VIP revenue and streamline management and operations. For more information and to schedule a demo, go to trio360.vip. And if you're attending NIGA this year, stop by our booth at the show, booth number 272. Thank you all for attending, and have a good afternoon.